My name is Dan Mennill, and I'm going to talk about using wireless microphone arrays to triangulate the position of animals. Wild animals use conspicuous acoustic signals to exchange information of vital importance for survival and reproduction. In my research lab, we use acoustic monitoring to study animal behavior, ecology, evolution, and conservation. Working in ecosystems in North and South America, my research team has collected acoustic data on birds, frogs, and mammals, and we've published more than 150 scientific papers to describe our findings. One area of specialty in my research group has been multi-channel microphone array recordings for triangulating the position of free-living animals, and that is the focus of my talk today. I'm going to talk about cable-based arrays and then wireless arrays. I'll talk about triangulating in 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions, and then I'll offer some advice on strategies for collecting array recordings. A microphone array is an array of spatially dispersed recorders that enable users to record from multiple locations simultaneously. They have been used widely to study diverse animals in many different ways. My colleagues and I published a paper called Acoustic Monitoring in Terrestrial Environments using Microphone Arrays in the Journal of Applied Ecology. And this paper summarizes the diverse forms of microphone arrays, it summarizes instances in which microphone arrays have been used, and it includes technical considerations for deploying microphone arrays. One of the most appealing features of a microphone array is the ability to triangulate the position of an animal based on multiple channels of recordings of its sounds. Here's how it works. Picture an array of 4 microphones surrounding an area where an animal produces a sound. Every time that animal produces a sound, its voice spreads around it in a roughly spherical fashion, so that that sound is recorded with a slight delay by each one of those microphones. If we calculate the specific GPS position of each one of those microphones, we can then triangulate the position of the animal based on those delays in sound arrival time. The beauty of this system is that we can record an entire ecosystem and sample every sound within that environment and triangulate the position of every sound, all without ever having to capture an animal or even be present in the environment while the recordings are collected. This approach to triangulating animals has 3 requirements. First, a sound must be recorded by 3 or more microphones in order to triangulate. Second, the microphone positions must be known, and they must be known accurately. The accuracy with which you estimate an animal's position depends on the accuracy with which you sample the microphone locations. Finally, the recordings must be synchronized, and they must be synchronized perfectly. All devices suffer from clock drift, where over time 2 clocks will become desynchronized from each other. This is imperceptible to us, but it is enough to destroy the subtle delays in sound arrival time necessary to triangulate the position of animals with a multi-channel array. The first microphone arrays that I used in my research group were cable-based microphone arrays. We used kilometers of microphone cable to connect 8 or 16 microphones to a single recording device. In this case, a multi-channel recording card connected to a laptop computer. The problem with clock drift was solved by virtue of having all of the microphones recording to a single device so that there was no clock drift between the different microphones. We use this approach to study many different kinds of animals. I'll single out 2 that were of special importance to my research team. The first is this animal, the rufous and white wren that lives in the Guanacaste Conservation Area in northwestern Costa Rica. Like many tropical birds, both male and females sing in this species, and sometimes they sing together in coordinated vocal duets, but their reasons for doing so are controversial. So we set up an array of 8 microphones around the territories of rufous and white wrens. Here's an aerial view of the tropical dry forest canopy, showing you the location of 8 microphones, all relaying information back to the central base station where the recording computer is. This system generates 8-channel spectrograms like this one, and in this case I've isolated a duet from a pair of rufous and white wrens. I'll color code the male in blue and the female in red to make them easy to see. And you can see the male is picked up particularly well in channels 5, 6, and 7, the female in channels 7 and 8, and 4 or 5 to a lesser degree. And based on the delays in sound arrival time, not amplitude differences, but delays in sound arrival time, we're able to use that information to triangulate the specific position of the male and the female when they sang this acoustic duet. Leave this system in place over the course of a morning and you gain a very interesting picture of the spatial behavior of a pair of rufous and white wrens. Here's an entire morning's worth of triangulated positions within this microphone array. Given the secretive behavior of wrens, given the thick vegetation in tropical forests, this kind of data would be impossible to gather without the use of a technology like a microphone array. With these data, we showed that birds perform duets with highly variable distances of separation, and we show that birds tend to approach each other when they perform multiple duets, playing a version of the child's game Marco Polo. Another instance where we used a cable-based microphone array was to study the vocal behavior of temperate songbirds, in this case, black-capped chickadees. Here's an aerial view of the peninsula at Queen's University Biological Station north of Kingston, Ontario, Canada. I'll map on top of that the 16 microphone cable array that my collaborators and I set up in that area. You can see the 16 microphone positions all through cables relayed back to a central recording computer at the base station. I'll superimpose on top of that the position of the chickadees in the area. And you can see that this 16-element array allows us to sample the entire neighborhood of black-capped chickadees. And we can triangulate the position of each one of those animals and find out what they're doing and whether their behavior influences the behavior of animals around them. This system generates a 16-channel recording, like the one pictured here, and we can isolate individuals within that and use delays in sound arrival time to figure out where every animal in that neighborhood was every time they produced a song. My co-authors and I wrote a series of papers using this system, and we learned many things, but among other things, we learned that breeding neighborhoods of black-capped chickadees are dynamic communication networks where animals eavesdrop on one another and use information gained by listening to each other to inform their territorial behavior and their reproductive choices. So these cable-based arrays have provided us with insights into the lives of animals that we couldn't have gathered otherwise. But cable-based arrays are challenging. They are cumbersome. The cables are very heavy. The cables are prone to damage as they're strung up through the forest by being chewed by animals or knocked over by things moving through the forest. And when they're set up, they make the forest look like a maple sugaree. And moreover, they're completely exhausting to set up for the recorders deploying the array. And so I was very excited when, a decade ago, Wildlife Acoustics created a digital recorder with an integrated GPS system. Here you can see one of the first ones I used, the SM2 Plus GPS, which looks like a typical song meter SM2, except on top you'll notice a GPS antenna feeding information into the song meter. This integration of the GPS signal means that the song meter can resample the recording to match the incoming information from GPS satellites of exactly what time it is. The GPS device isn't feeding the information on the position of the recorder, but on the time, so that it can correct for any clock drift, and the recording collected by this song meter can be matched exactly with any other song meters in the region with an integrated GPS unit. I was so excited about this because it really meant for the first time we had the capacity for a microphone array that fits in a backpack, a system where multiple units could be set up and monitored by just one individual, for really the first time in history. To test this system, my research team set up an array of 4 GPS integrated digital recorders at 12 different sites, 6 in a forest and 6 in an open field environment. And then we played back from loudspeakers in the area near these arrays 25 different kinds of sounds from birds, frogs, and mammals. We found that the system produces accurate location estimates across diverse types of animal signals. The average location accuracy was 1.87 meters, which is quite good. Location accuracy was slightly higher when the microphones were located closer together. It was slightly higher when the sound that was played back was inside the area bounded by the microphones instead of outside the area. And the accuracy was slightly higher in the field environment versus the forest environment, probably due to the effect of leaves on sound propagation in the forest. We described our findings in this paper in the journal Methods in Ecology and Evolution, and this paper includes many ideas about how to deploy a wireless microphone array for triangulating sounds. A word about software. We've used many different software approaches over the years to process multi-channel recordings, but I will single out one here. The one I'll single out was spearheaded by my former postdoc, Dr. Dave Wilson, and led by Dave, our team developed a software package called Sound Finder that uses the time delays in multiple channels, such as delays you could gather through software like Raven, in order to calculate the position of animals. It is free software and it can be implemented in Excel or in R. All of the research I've talked about so far today uses microphone arrays to triangulate the position of animals in 2 dimensions, as though the world was a flat plane. But recently, we have expanded our use of microphone arrays into the 3rd dimension. With my PhD student, Zach Gake, I have developed an 8-element microphone array for triangulating in 3 dimensions. For this project, we used song meter SM3 plus GPS units, and you can see in this diagram 4 SM3 plus GPS units, each connected to 2 microphones. In this case, we mounted the microphones in buckets. Our goal was to record animals flying over top of our array, and the bucket acts as a sound baffle against sounds from below or beside the microphones. So we mounted these on poles arranged in a square with 25 meters along the sides, and the poles were just over 7 meters tall. So this effectively creates a cube of 8 microphones for sampling any animals around the sampling cube. Our goal was to record migratory songbirds passing over top of this array to gain a better understanding of the dynamics and behavior of flocking birds when they are migrating. Here's a photograph of Zach with one of the 4 microphone poles up on the southern shore of Lake Superior. And here are the sound spectrograms that this kind of system generates. Again, they're 8-channel sound spectrograms, and I've isolated 3 different species of wood warblers. The scale on the x-axis here is milliseconds, and you can see the delays in that same signal reaching each one of those 8 microphones. It is those delays in sound arrival time that allow us to triangulate the position of the bird as it passes overhead. We found that this system accurately triangulates the position of loudspeakers broadcasting song with an accuracy of 1.5 to 2 meters and predicts the location of an animal flying overhead above the array with an accuracy of 2.7 meters. And we're currently using this approach to study the spatial dynamics of migrating songbird flocks. So, if you want to triangulate with multiple GPS-integrated digital recorders, what do you need? First, you need 2 or more GPS-integrated recorders. The GPS signal, remember, is in order to correct for clock drift so that multiple recordings, even though they're not connected by cable, are perfectly synchronized. Secondly, you need a global positioning system in order to survey the microphones. The integrated GPS unit is not well suited to this purpose. Instead, it is worthwhile to have a separate GPS system to precisely measure the position of every one of your microphones. Finally, you need software. You need software for combining the individual or 2-channel recordings from each of the digital recorders. We use the free software Syrinx PC for that purpose. You need software for measuring the sound arrival time delays. We use Raven for this purpose. And you need software for calculating the positions based on the time delays. That's where Sound Finder, the free software that we've created, can be used. I have used the SM2 Plus GPS and SM3 Plus GPS units. The latest version of this technology from Wildlife Acoustics is called the SM4TS. And although I haven't used this system, is directly analogous to the systems I have used, featuring 2 stereo microphones and an integrated GPS antenna. I have some important notes about deploying microphone arrays for triangulation. First, the positions of every microphone within an array must be sampled accurately and rigorously. In this photograph, you can see I've positioned on a tripod a survey-grade GPS system directly above the microphone tip. Your ability to triangulate a sound source depends on accurate estimation of the microphone position. And so a survey-grade GPS system like this one, which is an Ashtec, I've also used Trimble. Many universities and conservation organizations own survey-grade GPS systems that could be used. If you don't have access to one, we have explored ways of using handheld GPS units, leaving them in place for long periods of time and collecting many points, rejecting the most extreme points and then calculating averages, and that works as well, although not quite as effectively as a survey-grade GPS system. Second, it is imperative to measure temperature and humidity. The speed of sound through air varies subtly with temperature and humidity, and it is important to correct for this when estimating the position of animals. So every time you set up an array, as in this photograph, you need to hang a temperature and humidity data logger somewhere within the array. Next, it is important to include test sounds in all recordings. Every day that I collect multi-channel recordings, I set up a loudspeaker from a known position and I broadcast sounds. Here you can see on one tripod a loudspeaker broadcasting a test sound, and directly above it I'm using my survey-grade GPS system to measure the position of that loudspeaker. The first sound that I calculate the position of when I get back to my computer is that test sound, and that gives me confidence that the multi-channel array can accurately predict the position of a known sound source before I start triangulating the position of animals within the area. My next tip is that you can use extension cables to make a microphone array much more effective. A stereo digital recorder that has 2 microphones mounted on the side can't provide you with much helpful information to triangulate the position of an animal because the 2 microphones are quite close together. If instead you purchase a relatively affordable extension cable and separate one of those microphones by some distance, you can gain better information of more help for triangulating the position of the sound source. And so the simplest form of a microphone array would be 2 digital recorders, each with 1 microphone mounted on the side, and then a long extension cable coming off each one to another microphone located some distance away. That microphone array would have 4 elements with just 2 digital recorders and is relatively affordable. Next, I recommend providing station identifications at each element within a microphone array. And this is something we do almost every day that we're recording. We visit every microphone and we tap on the tip of the microphone and say the name of that microphone and the name of the digital recorder that is recording there. Often, when you're back at the computer assembling separate channels of recording together, you can get mixed up, and that can really screw up array processing. And so if you have walked up to a recording at a specific time, tapped on the microphone and identified it, you can listen on your computer to the recording and confirm that everything is in the correct location. Before I finish, I have a tip on when not to use a microphone array for triangulating the position of a sound source. Many times each year, I'm contacted by people who have read about our work and have questions like, we're looking for a rare animal, so we want to set up a multi-channel array in order to try and find that animal. Or we want to understand habitat occupancy by an animal, so we're going to set up multiple microphones and triangulate where animals are. Most of the time, I think that is an ineffective time to use a microphone array, because when you're triangulating the position of an animal, you have to move all of your recorders in close together, so that wherever an animal produces a sound from, it will be picked up by multiple microphones. You could have those same number of recorders spread out on a much broader scale across the landscape, and you would have a better sampling of the entire landscape. If you set up just one recorder at a time with different areas of recording, you could then process those recordings, find out where your target animal was detected, and then move in with a more targeted approach to observation. Given that it is expensive to have multiple recorders close together, given that it is time intensive to process these recordings, I think you want to make absolutely certain that you need the microphone array to answer your question before you go to the trouble of setting up one of these systems. In summary, wireless microphone arrays are now commercially available, relatively easy to set up, and they work effectively to triangulate the position of sound sources both in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. Excitingly, they offer us new opportunities for studying animal behavior, ecology, evolution, and conservation. I wish to conclude with some quick acknowledgements. I wish to acknowledge my students and collaborators. All of the work that I've described today was a team effort, and I've identified the people who aided in those efforts in showing you the papers that we have written together. I would also like to thank the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, who has funded my research for the last 20 years, and the University of Windsor, which is my academic home. And that is my presentation on using wireless microphone arrays to triangulate the position of animals. I would be happy to connect with anybody interested in using this type of system, whether to collaborate with you or to offer advice as you undertake this kind of research yourself.